This is What's Left America, and I'm Chris Tritico.
I'm Andi Georgsson.
And I'm Chris Bell.
James is out of town. He's on a plane right now, so we're going to go without him. That's my view.
I'm sad.
I'm all right.
What's Left America is produced by Left Out Media and brought to you by the generosity of our sponsors and friends like the Houston Federation of Teachers, Local 2415 AFL-CIO. Today on the show, we're going to cover billionaire mud wrestling, the family medical leave versus Social Security, do you believe in miracles, Beto O'Rourke versus Ted Cruz, and the enemy of the people, is it the media or the president? And of course, we'll finish the show as always with Out of Left Field. Let's get right into it. Billionaire mud wrestling. President Trump lashes out last week at the Koch brothers after the key conservative group Americans for Prosperity pulled support for the Representative Kevin Cramer against Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota. It was cast as a warning to other Republicans who might be tempted to stray from free market, fiscally restrained approach backed by the Koch brothers and their followers. The globalist Koch brothers, who have become the president said the globalist Koch brothers have become a total joke in the real Republican circles and are against strong borders and powerful trade. The president said, I never sought their support because I don't need their money or their bad ideas. They love my tax and regulation cuts, judicial picks, and more. I made them richer. Their network is highly overrated. I've beaten them at every turn. They want to protect their companies outside the U.S. from being taxed. I'm for America first and American workers, a puppet for no one. Two nice guys with bad ideas. Make America great again is what he said, Chris Bell.
Well, those jokes may be on him later, because those are the very people who may end up defeating Donald Trump, and not just the Koch brothers, but their followers, because the true conservatives in the Republican Party realize that Donald Trump is a chameleon. They still can't stand him. And most of those folks, and I think one reason that polling shows that Republicans overwhelmingly approve of Donald Trump is that so many of the people who don't approve of Donald Trump now are self-identifying as independents. And those polls are just folks who self-identify as Republicans. A lot of them can't stand it anymore, and they are now changing how they classify themselves. But I think it's interesting that you have the Koch brothers doing what they're doing. You have a convention in Austin this week of conservatives who are disgusted by Donald Trump, trying to find out if there's any common ground where they can come back into the Republican fold and where they can agree. So there's all this going on, and I think what you see, just when some people started fearing that the Democrats might be letting it slip away, everything that you don't want to have in August of an election year is suddenly happening to the Republican Party.
One of the things, though, that Donald Trump's pointing out here is the Koch brothers didn't support me when I ran for president. I won anyway, Andy. I don't need them now, and these people don't need them.
I think that the president is right. I don't think he needs the Koch brothers. My question to Chris Bell is this a breakup of the Republican Party, or is the center portion of the party stronger because of this split?
The breakup of the Republican Party happened a long time ago. It happened during the 2016 election. And then what you had is a lot of people saying, hey, he won, so I'll just get in line. But you still have a very strong faction of the Republican Party that's not getting in line, represented by the Koch brothers. And I think Chris makes an excellent point that a lot of this is the old Trump style of just pure vengeance. They didn't support him, and so he's going to do that kind of bullshit he likes to do to, make fun of them and degrade them on Twitter. But the truth of the matter is they still have a strong following.
Well, because it sounded like you were saying that that faction of the party, the Koch brother faction, could defeat the president.
Sure.
And I don't think that is the case, because if it were, then I think that more Republicans who feel that way would be speaking out. But right now, there is a complete lockdown on criticism of the president.
But waves are driven by energy. And when you have the left so energized now because of everything they're disgusted by that they see coming out of the White House, I don't see that subsiding at all between now and November. And meanwhile, the Republicans are having this big national discussion about trying to somehow come back together when half of the party, or a big percentage of the party, is repulsed by their standard bearer.
So you're you're saying it's good for the Democrats, not that this makes a portion of the Republican Party stronger.
I think those folks stay home. I think that's what we'll see happening.
The base that the base the president's talking to is steady or shrinking, and the people that are leaving that base are either going to the Americans for Prosperity group, or they're becoming independents and they're looking for a home. And what the Koch brothers are trying to say is, if you're disaffected by the president, you need to come to us. And what the Democrats are saying, if you're disaffected with the Republican Party, you need to look at us. And so to answer your question, there's a whole lot of people out there, and if the Koch brothers think they can defeat the president, as Chris Bell is suggesting here, is by gathering those people who are so upset with the rhetoric and the strong move to the right that the president has taken what's left of the Republican Party. There may be enough people out there that the Koch brothers could put together in a coalition to do just what Chris is suggesting.
Well, even as Kisser Ted Cruz went down to that conference in Austin and started trying to criticize Trump and acting like he separates himself from Trump on certain issues, whereas he hasn't at all. He's stepped right in line
every time
with him, of course, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. But it is a very difficult position that they are in right now. And the numbers, when you look at them, it makes no sense that you would have polling that suggests you have one of the most popular presidents ever among the Republican Party with the lowest overall number of any president in history. Obviously, yeah, the folks who still identify as Republican, they think he's just great. But there's a huge number of Americans who think he's just awful.
And a shrinking number. And so that group of people need to be picked up by either someone like the Kochs or someone like the Democrats, and someone needs to get a message to pick them up. And that's what the Kochs are trying to say.
The thing about it is that the Koch brothers spend a lot of money, and the Republicans who are running for elected office still need Koch money, and they're still going to take it. Trump is not supporting anybody financially. So I think that it's the Republicans who are splitting the baby, trying to get the money on one hand, but not criticize the president on the other hand. I don't know really where that leaves the sensible Republican.
Well, that's kind of funny, too, because, of course, they were probably the greatest beneficiaries. The Koch brothers were the greatest beneficiaries of Citizens United and that decision because, of course, they could fund super PACs and
the tax law.
And throw all that money around. And I think that's all changing so much because now, let's face it, the 1% is pretty hardy out there in America, and they can all start super PACs, and it's no more. I remember back in the day when I was getting involved in statewide politics, if someone could make a $100,000 contribution, that was considered extraordinary. Now, I don't even know if they get the tickets to the best parties given the amount of money these folks are giving. And that's not just on the right. That's on both sides.
And that was exactly what the president was saying when he was attacking them, was that they love my tax and regulation, they love the tax cuts, they love my judicial picks, but yet they hate me. And it was actually a pretty good point that the president made about the Koch brothers.
Well, that may speak for the majority or a lot of people.
Quite frankly, yeah, that's probably true.
Well, the other thing is that the Koch brothers, I don't think, are even as powerful as a lot of people on the left thought that they would be after Citizens United. As a matter of fact, we don't talk about Citizens United that much anymore because it hasn't been the unmitigated disaster that we all feared that it would be. All this money is out there, but it has never guaranteed the election of one candidate over another.
But I completely disagree, Andy. I do think it's been an unmitigated disaster in that it's taken transparency completely out of it. It was never really transparent. But when you have no levels and no true governance of a financing system of elections, it's an absolute nightmare. And it really has delivered power. If that's how you're going to finance your campaign, it's delivered power to only the wealthiest of Americans on both sides. It's horrible. And we had finally, I don't think the timing of the decision is any big shock to anyone. Barack Obama had changed politics. He raised money without the big givers. He had done it online, really what I think you need in a democracy. And suddenly they said, oh, shit, people without the backing of multimillionaires and multi-billionaires can suddenly raise enough money to run for president. We got to do something about this. And I think it has been a nightmare.
All right. Well, let's move on. It sounds like we just ended that topic. So let's move on. All right, let's move on. The Family Medical Leave Act versus Social Security. I thought this was so interesting. Senator Marco Rubio from Florida, last Thursday rolled out legislation to create a paid parental leave benefit. And this was really interesting to me. It was furthering a push from Republicans to take action on the topic. Rubio's bill would allow new parents to receive early Social Security benefits to use for paid leave in exchange for delaying the collection of Social Security benefits by about 3 to 6 months when they hit retirement age. For the Republican Party, this is a new issue. It's an issue that's traditionally associated with the Democratic Party and the left. Rubio said at a press conference last Thursday, but I don't think that issues that are good for our children and good for families should be ideological or partisan.
Who says?
That's right, exactly. And, I looked at this. I haven't seen the whole bill. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand trashed it, said that it's not a good way to go. And Gillibrand's bill would have a slight payroll tax increase so the government could give paid family medical leave to people through a tax increase. I'm having a very hard time coming up with a reason why I don't support Marco Rubio's bill.
Well, I am glad that we are talking about this. Anybody, Republican or Democrat, filing legislation offering more time for workers to take care of family members is a good thing. What I am concerned about is that these laws, like the current Family Medical Leave Act, never seem to touch the people at the lowest level of the income scale. First of all, the bill probably won't touch small companies, and it probably won't have guarantees for people to keep their jobs, so they won't have a job to come back to, and that's really important to address. I think that we need a holistic bill.
But it's not as if this is the bill that's going to be passed. At least it starts the discussion, and it signals that a pretty high-powered Republican is willing to say the Democrats have had a good idea, and I'm willing to get on board and propose my own version. What the Republicans usually do, they propose something that sounds the same but actually guts exactly what the Democrats are trying to do. I don't see that in this bill, and it sounds like most of the criticism that's come from the left has come as a result of the fact that he's jumped on board with an idea that has traditionally come from the left. And I just hope that we don't do the same thing with this that we did with prescription drug benefits, because when George Bush put that forward, Democrats acted horrified because that had always been the Democratic issue, and they tried to find all these problems with it. And I was a freshman in Congress, and I jumped on board with the opposition. And one of my Republican friends, Tom Cole, who I greatly respect to this day, we were out for drinks one night. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen the Democratic Party do. It was y'all's issue. Why didn't you just take it and adopt it and say this is a great thing for seniors?
And that's exactly what the Democrats are doing, because they're jumping behind Kirsten Gillibrand's bill, which would have Gillibrand's bill, which would have a tax increase to pay for the time off, instead of what Marco Rubio is proposing, which is zero taxes.
Well,
it's a zero tax increase.
In all honesty, I mean, we can't sit around here and say that we want Congress to work again and start talking again and start compromising again and then criticize it when a Republican comes out and jumps on board with a really good
idea,
progressive idea.
It just shocked me, and I think. And I hate to be cynical again, but is Marco Rubio that smart that he just said, look, we can steal this issue from the Democrats 3 months before the midterm election?
Well, I agree with the both of you. The best thing that the Democrats could do is to just get on board and say, oh, my gosh, great idea. Picking up on our plan. And, the Republicans could have done that with health care, but they chose to do the opposite. So when Massachusetts basically had, created its version of Obamacare, as soon as Obama wanted to do it, it was a horrible idea. And I think the Democrats would do well not to go down that road of being against everything that the Republicans put forth for the sole reason that it was the Republicans who put it.
But Andi, you're revising history. Mitt Romney didn't have anything to do with that health care plan in Boston.
He hated it. So let me just, this bill, as Marco Rubio has proposed, has no change in the way that the Family Medical Leave Act is currently designed. In other words, The Family Medical Leave Act provides for 12 weeks of unpaid time off, and you're guaranteed that your employment is protected, not the job you're in, but your employment is protected. So when you come back, you still have a job, not the job. And so,
yeah, I didn't want to confuse the issue. I hope I did not confuse the issue by bringing that up. I just want us to address some of the things that, for low-income workers, the people who really need this sort of protection in whatever bill we have going forward.
The Family Medical Leave Act was one of the greatest pieces of legislation that's been passed in 50 years, and it has protected people. The problem with legislation like that is you can never go down low enough to affect small businesses where you could force them to say you have to give an employee, one of your 4 employees, 12 weeks off. You just can't do it. But a company cannot.
No, absolutely. But Tritico, can you imagine a scenario in which a person is a minimum wage worker at a fast food restaurant and says, I'm going to take 12 weeks off, as is my right under the Family Medical Leave Act, and come back to a job if the manager of that restaurant did not want that person back?
Right.
So, I mean,
no, I get it.
Enforcement is a problem.
Right. And without the Family Medical Leave Act, big companies wouldn't do it either. And so I'm glad we have it.
I'm glad we have it.
All right. So let's move on. Do you believe in miracles? I'm starting to. O'Rourke versus Cruz.
Singing has never been my strong suit, but it's really kind of hard to resist.
I believe in miracles.
Beto O'Rourke is taking on Ted Cruz for the junior Senate seat here in the state of Texas. I got this out of an article I read. Beto O'Rourke has never been closer to catching the Zodiac killer. For months now, Ted Cruz's Democratic challenger has been racking up Facebook followers and piling up campaign cash. O'Rourke has routinely out-fundraised the Republican incumbent despite refusing to take back money. He's made his presence known in all 254 counties of the Lone Star State and on every major social media platform in cyberspace. Now, that's actually really impressive stat that Beto O'Rourke has visited every county in the state of Texas. And I doubt there's any politician, I don't know if any politician's ever done that in a statewide race in Texas, gone to every county in the state. And this is a big state. His campaign has tightened up the polls. In late May, Quinnipiac University had Cruz leading 50-39. In July, it showed a margin shrinking to 49-43. Just last night, Texas Lyceum put him down just by a mere 2 percentage points. This race is a real race.
Beto is a very attractive candidate, and he has worked up a lot of enthusiasm in Texas and nationally in the Democratic Party. I don't know if he can win or not, but I tell you what, he has lit a fire under Cruz's ass.
Yes, he can win. And for it to be this close at this stage is telling. My only disappointment is that he has millions and millions of dollars in the bank, and he chose not to go on television this summer. I had advised the campaign, that was my biggest regret about my governor's race in 2006, that we couldn't build stronger name ID during the summer and then build on that in the fall when we really had some momentum. But they've decided to bank it all in the closing months of the campaign, and so far they've shown they know what they're doing. So we'll see. But when it's this close in the polls at this stage, yes, it's absolutely a real race, and it's pretty fascinating. I think the fact that they're going to have 5 debates is very interesting as well.
The polls show that the race is tightening, and like I said, Texas Lyceum showed last night, which today's Sunday. So last night, within 2 points, but the poll also showed that O'Rourke's biggest challenge is that no one knows who he is. And
right,
so,
and that's a huge disadvantage.
And that's the point you're trying to make.
Ted Cruz has 100% name ID, and Beto O'Rourke obviously does not. And so that's why I would have liked to have seen that deficit cut into over the summer months. But there certainly, you can see who has the wind at his back. Yep. And Cruz came down to that convention in Austin today and said, you all need to wake up. Everyone's taking this for granted. People just think that because I'm a Republican, I'm automatically going to win. And he sees it as different. And you have to also dial in the fact that Ted Cruz is detestable, and anybody who really watches him gets that feeling. I think it's fascinating, some of the talk that's gone on about the debates. Andi, I don't know what you think about that, the fact that they're going to have 5.
Oh, no, I think it's great. And I think that shows how concerned Ted Cruz is, because if he weren't, he wouldn't bother.
He wouldn't have agreed to any.
He wouldn't have agreed to any.
Right.
But
like almost every other statewide office holder has done thus far.
Talk about the opposite of Citizens United. Beto O'Rourke is also one of those candidates who's gotten his donations in small amounts. And I thought that did speak to the amount of enthusiasm that is out there. He is the person at the top of the ticket he's the person who's going to bring Texans out to vote.
Once the dam breaks, too, then it's all over.
The question is, will enough Democrats come out to vote?
Well, Ted Cruz gave up, I think, a lot of political capital in the presidential race. People saw him for what he was, and he really gave up a lot of his political capital here in the state when people saw the way he was in that race. These debates, I think, were a big. Now, doing it on Friday night was his smartest move, Cruz's smartest move by doing them on a Friday night. But 5 debates. Ted Cruz thinks he's the greatest debater in the history of debating. I think that when people see him and see him interact, it's not going to bode well for Ted Cruz. And I think that's a huge mistake for him to get these do 5 debates.
There are a couple of interesting things about that, in that the whole Friday night scheme started back when I was running for governor in 2006, and that was the only debate that Rick Perry would agree to, and it was going to be on a Friday night. And all of the coverage was, it's a Friday night, that's the night everybody goes to watch high school football here in Texas, no one's going to be watching the debate. Well, as it turned out, and it was to my favor because it was a really good night for me, but because Kinky Friedman was in the race and it was such a clown show that it turned out having the largest audience of any debate in the history of Texas. And so it still can be huge.
Right.
So,
Beto's got that kind of star power.
So to think that just because it's on a Friday night, it won't have any bearing on the race is absolutely absurd. And if Beto O'Rourke comes off as likable as I've seen him, that's going to attract voters.
It absolutely is. And that's why I think 5 debates was a huge mistake on Cruz's part. Cruz, you mentioned that he was at this conservative political gathering in Austin. He said it a lot stronger than you gave him credit for. When he was talking about this race, he said, we do have a real race. Cruz talking about this race with Beto O'Rourke when he was on stage, and he said, we are taking it deadly serious, suggesting that Republicans better get serious and not take this lightly.
I think what's going on here is that, he's been outraised. He sees the momentum. He sees the polling, and he has to wake those folks up. Folks, I'm not kidding here.
We've talked all the time about apathy in races, and we're concerned that the Democrats are gonna stay home from the polls, especially in Texas when we get our butts kicked in statewide races all the time. Ted Cruz is the one talking about apathy right now. Why is that?
Well, he's an odious person, and I think that he knows that people think so. The other person who shares that characteristic is John Culberson, and he's another guy who has done nothing for his district until he saw that Lizzie Fletcher was a potential strong challenger for him. So if nothing else, these great Democratic candidates bring out Republicans who think that they've got an easy win to do a little something. I'm afraid that just showing up a little bit, in the run up to the election is going to make Republicans forget about how they had not seen these people for years before, will make them forget about all of that and come out for them.
Well, I have to disagree with Andi, though. I mean, she says he realizes he's an odious person. All the odious people that I know don't realize.
No, he realizes that other people find him odious.
But I don't think he realizes how odious he is.
He's been
because they would do something about it. And he can't.
He is booed everywhere unless it's a friendly audience. I mean, I have seen him on a stage with John Cornyn and in a liberal audience, and the audience was polite to Cornyn and could not stop booing every single thing that Ted Cruz said.
And I think that's very important.
He knows he's
now, because
liked.
I think that's what launched Beto O'Rourke's campaign. I went to his kickoff here in Houston. I know probably 75% in that packed hall had no idea who he was, but they knew he was running against Ted Cruz, someone they absolutely could not stand.
And that was enough.
But he's also put meat on the bone. He's run a great social media campaign. He has visited every county. He's an extraordinarily attractive candidate. And the National Republican Party better be horrified because, like I was saying earlier, if the dam breaks here and finally they can't write the article anymore or start every article anymore with the fact that no Democrat has won a statewide office in 20 some odd years or what have you, and it becomes a competitive state again, well, that completely changes the presidential map. Completely.
Now, you were talking about the fact that you lamented that you didn't go to air earlier when you were running for governor. Well, last week, Ted Cruz went to air in Dallas with his first attack ad against Beto O'Rourke. So he listened to you.
Right. Well, I think you have to get people's attention early. And I've run into that from experience. I mean, after the debate we had, it wasn't until October 6th. So literally we had a month to build on the momentum we had coming out of the debate. And we certainly had money, and we hoped we had enough to do, but it was just too high a mountain to climb in that short a period of time. He'll have longer. He can go on the airwaves right after Labor Day and build, and that probably will be fine.
And he's got enough cash to do it.
Right.
And, another thing is that Beto O'Rourke is really targeting younger voters, and younger voters are reached through other means than just television. He may know exactly what he's doing.
But the one thing that's a little bit frightening about the campaign is that if you go to any of the events or if you look at any of the events that are posted online, what you do see is that the audiences are overwhelmingly white. And there again, we've had this discussion before. It'll be interesting to see what he does to try to engage the African-American community and to engage the Hispanic and Asian communities and the other communities that make up the Democratic Party. And I don't like the fact that it's become the party of identity politics any more than anyone, but it sort of is.
Well,
and you have to acknowledge that.
I think that's such a good point you just made, Andy, that the way we elect people has changed so much with social media that it may be as important to focus on a social media campaign as a television and radio campaign now. And Donald Trump proved that.
Exactly. I mean, if you can live stream, why go to television?
Right.
And the Russians proved that.
The Russians proved that.
They were very effective on social media.
That's right. They elected a president.
Chris Bell, to your point about audiences being overwhelmingly white, I think that the Democrats would do well to look at Stacey Abrams' race in Georgia for governor. If she wins that race, she'll be the first black woman governor of any state in the United States in the history of the United States. And what she's doing is bringing Democrats into the party who have given up on electoral politics. And she is not trying to run to the center and bring in disaffected Republicans. She's being honest about who she is. I've got debt. My brother has been in prison. He has mental illness. People see her as a real person and they identify with her. And she's raised a lot of money, and she is another Democratic campaign that the National Party finds really exciting. I think that Beto could do more of that.
And I got an email from her, which was probably the best political fundraising email that I've received in years about, I think the subject was that little black girl. It may have been even stronger than that, and I don't want to misquote it, but it went on to tell her absolutely phenomenal story of where she came from and what she has done, and it's amazing, and I think that's going to be an extremely competitive race, and I hope we can have her on our podcast.
And, if I'd have known that you could get elected by being in debt, I would have posted my wife's credit card bills years ago and gotten elected to something.
Hashtag sexist.
Speaking of Ted Cruz, I also want to bring up the fact you see a tremendous number of Beto bumper stickers. And where I live over in the Heights here in Houston, it's almost like you're required to have a Beto yard sign in your yard, and which makes it a really great neighborhood. But also, we have a different bumper sticker that we want to give away here at What's Left America, and it's Ted quote, one-term crews. And we have those, and they're available. And if you will go like our podcast, and don't we need them to write a review and tell us that they've written a review in order to qualify for one of our bumper
We need to know who they are.
Yes, you have to. Can they email us?
They can send us a message on Facebook.
And how would they do that, Chris?
I don't know, but we'll figure that out. How would they do that,
in
Andy?
our show page.
Okay,
Show notes.
Andy is our social media expert, so Andy will take care of that.
And so what would they need to do?
Yeah, I mean, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, any of the podcast platforms, and check out the show notes and click on the link and send us your information, and we'll send you a bumper sticker.
Put in there one-term Ted, and we'll send you a bumper sticker when you tell us where to send it.
We'll have pictures of the bumper sticker. They're not fancy, but I think they send a strong message.
All right, let's move on. The enemy of the people, is it the media or is it the president? You know, the president has, before he became president, well, all during the election, he's been calling the media the enemy of the people. Certain members of the media have just gotten tired of it. Jim Acosta with CNN has really been taking it on, and he's been covering it, certainly been covering it and taking it on directly. Last week, he went straight at it at a White House briefing and asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders to say once and for all that she does not consider the media to be the enemy of the people. Let's listen to that.
All the people around the world are watching what you're saying, Sarah, and the White House for the United States of America, the President of the United States should not refer to us as the enemy of the people. His own daughter acknowledges that, and all I'm asking you to do, Sarah, is to acknowledge that right now and right here.
I appreciate your passion. I share it. I've addressed this question. I've addressed my personal feelings. I'm here to speak on behalf of the President. He's made his comments clear.
As you can tell, she wouldn't. That was the second time he asked her in the briefing to state that the media was not the enemy of the people. This started when I was talking with a reporter, and he said that Jim Acosta, he thought, was making himself the story and not covering the story. And it struck me as odd. It's coming from a reporter who's one of the ones under attack. Y'all have both been reporters. How do y'all feel about that? I mean, with the president doing what he's doing and the media constantly being under the barrage from the president of the United States, I'm not sure that I agree that Jim is doing anything that he shouldn't be doing here. What do y'all think?
I don't know that there's any way to report this story without making yourself the part of the story. Jim Acosta and other reporters who cover the president are part of the story because they are being heckled at Trump rallies. The president is calling them the enemy of the people at those rallies, encouraging the crowd to violence against the media, lashing out on Twitter. I think that the press who cover the White House and who are in that briefing room would do better if they stood up for reporters who don't get their questions answered and who point out the problem with the president denigrating the press.
The footage from the president's last rally that I saw on CNN was playing showed a whole host of people with negative signs, yelling at Jim Acosta and the other CNN people, very negative things. And it's reaching a dangerous level with the president and the rhetoric that the president is putting out there. It's really reaching a dangerous level for members of the media to go.
And Chris, I encourage people to try to find the footage online. It's a scary crowd. I mean, there are people flipping them off, and one guy, big burly guy, wearing a "Fuck the Media" T-shirt, very proudly showing it off. And so, this has been part of the Republican game for as long as I can remember. I remember when it was George Bush versus Bill Clinton, I guess the first time I saw a blame the media bumper sticker. I mean, it's always been part of their shtick. If it's not a positive story about the Republicans, then it's the media's fault. And as you point out, I was a reporter, and I was a reporter in Amarillo. And part of the politicians in Texas deal back then was to go to small towns, and you'd have folks that were very inexperienced, probably their first job in the media, and they expected everyone to come fawn over them. Well, I actually would go do a little research, and I'd ask some questions that might be a little bit challenging. And so later, I would be told by folks when these people come to town, they'd pull them aside. Who was that asshole? I mean, they didn't like that.
Chris, this is fundamentally different. Right now, the idea that everything that is reported in the New York Times or the Washington Post is fake news. The idea that the President of the United States wants the public to not believe what they read, baffling them with bullshit. I do think it's dangerous. There's so many jokes about politicians, lawyers, and reporters, which you've been all three, Chris Bell. So that's
I used
a
to call the Triple Crown
the problem is it's purely self-centered on the president's part, and he knows it. And he's only doing it because, as he said in the past, by attacking the media, it fits his political purpose because it helps him. He thinks it helps keep his profile higher by keeping the media down. And he doesn't care that he's putting them in harm's way.
And really where I was going, I mean, the Republican Party was always very two-faced about it because on the one hand, they wanted to criticize the press, but they also knew the power of the press. And the power of the press because people believed him and listened to him.
Yeah, and
so
Trump,
this is taking it to an incredibly dangerous level to try to convince people that when they don't report something positive about you, they're simply reporting fake news.
They're the enemy. Kellyanne Conway this morning on one of the talk shows, I can't remember, had the gall to suggest that the problem is the media is reporting the fact that they're being attacked and that they're being threatened instead of reporting on what the president said at the rally.
Well, I mean, instead of Jim Acosta trying to make himself a part of the story, they're making Jim Acosta a part of the story. If you attack the reporters and you form a line and you sit there and start protesting against them, then you are doing exactly what you say you don't want, in that you're making them a part of the story.
I'm glad that Jim Acosta asked the question, and I thought it was very telling that Sarah Sanders would not answer it.
I want to talk just a couple of minutes about LeBron James and the president, and this really is kind of off the topic with the media, but LeBron James put his own money into a public school that takes only at-risk kids. They have extended school days, an extended school year with a summer session. And not only that, he gives GEDs to parents. They have a food pantry for parents. They give free lunches, free breakfast, a free snack, free bicycles. I've never seen anything like this.
And he's going to pay for their college education when they graduate.
If they graduate all the way through to high school and they graduate, he gives them a free college tuition at Akron University in Akron, Ohio. And he went on Don Lemon's show to pump this new school that he's helped paying for, and they got to talking about President Trump, and he said that President Trump tried to divide the country on the backs of athletes or something like that. President Trump, not being one to ever let anything go, immediately, and this is a guy who says he never watches CNN, almost immediately tweeted out that Don Lemon made someone as stupid as LeBron James look smart. Here it is. LeBron James was just interviewed by the dumbest man on television, Don Lemon. He made LeBron look smart, which isn't easy to do. I like Mike. Now, I've got two problems with this. First, why would the president ever attack someone who just did something this good for this many underprivileged kids? And second, why in the world would LeBron James go there and attack the president while he's in the middle of promoting this great thing that he did? I think both of them are wrong in that instance.
I didn't see where James attacked the president. I saw him answer with a very reasonable answer, and that's his right to do it. And I don't think that he's the problem.
He's been routinely critical of the president.
And there is not a problem with being critical of the president, especially when the president has a thing for attacking black athletes.
I agree, 100%. And I agree that he had the right to do it. This was not the right time.
The fact that he
let the president steal the show from his great thing that he did. He let the whole story get stolen, and now everybody's talking about the fight with the president instead of this great school he opened.
As soon as the tweet went out from the president, the show was stolen. As a matter of fact, I'm sure that's why I read about it, because the president sent out this ridiculous and hateful tweet.
Well, let's say I had a layman's reaction to the president's tweet and a more intellectual reaction. And my layman's reaction to his tweet was, what a dick. But my more intellectual response to it is that it's sad that if he just had an ounce of statesmanship, he could have said, yes, LeBron James and I have had our differences, but isn't it fantastic that a sports star multi-millionaire is setting this incredible example? And just like I was big enough to stand up and admit that I had made a mistake about Josh Reddick a couple of weeks ago, he should have been willing to do the same.
Right.
But
anyway.
Those who don't listen to What's Left America often lack direction.
That's exactly right. All right, that's all we have on that. Let's move into out of left field. Who wants to go first? Chris, go ahead. I'm going to go last today.
All right. So Andi and I both attended the University of Texas, and there was always a huge weekend in the spring called Roundup. And I was a member of a fraternity. I'm one of probably 10 or 15 UT frat boys who actually joined the Democratic Party later in life. That's not true. A lot of have found the light as years go on. But basically, it was a 3-day bender. Well, actually, it was supposed to be a 2-day bender. But in my particular fraternity, Phi Delta Theta, we turned it into a 3-day bender and would actually have the band from the night before come over on Sunday and play on the patio. And so we could go one more day. And one time that I will never forget, a very hilarious man got on stage, and he had gotten a copy of the National Enquirer that had this large headline that said, "Drinking is good for you." And he was sort of a math kind of guy, and he had done a graph to explain that the units of alcohol compared directly to the units of happiness. And he called it the happiness curve. Of course, it was complete bullshit, but on that Sunday afternoon, it made us all feel very much better. Well, fast forward, I am now 58, and the Telegraph in Great Britain came out this week with a headline, "Middle-aged drinking may reduce dementia risk, new study finds. Abstaining from alcohol in middle age may increase the risk of dementia in later life, according to a new study." And it goes on to say that a study of more than 9,000 people found those who never touch a drop around 50% more likely to develop the degenerative condition compared to those who drink moderately. Then the bad news came. If you drink more than 14 units a day, you have a greater chance of developing dementia.
So your whole
I'm
fraternity...
not going to say where I land on that scale, but I think you might be able to guess.
Might be an issue.
Oh, dear. So I was going to talk about something else, but Chris Bell reminding me of my days at the University of Texas at Austin makes me want to tell the following. My 4 years at UT were some of the happiest years of my life. But it's interesting as I look back on the things that I just took for granted in the sense that I accepted them as though there were no other way. And one of them was fraternity and sorority life. I learned almost immediately as a freshman, that there were white fraternities and sororities and black fraternities and sororities. And I didn't know much of anything about Greek life before I got there. And I didn't question that. But, looking back, the idea that I know that the white sororities at the University of Texas decided to disassociate themselves from the university so that they would not have to fall under the university rule that would have required them to accept members regardless of race. They didn't want to follow that rule, so they decided to leave. They were no longer a campus organization. It stuck with me how many things at UT were divided along racial lines, and I sort of just accepted it.
But isn't that what I know this isn't questioning time, but isn't that what university life is sort of supposed to be about, awakening? Don't you think there are those of us who are on the other side who look back and say, God, that was really fucked up.
Except that it still seems to be the way.
Right, if nobody woke up.
Right. I woke up.
I think I did too.
I woke up. As a matter of fact, I think that the kids, even then, would have been more open to it. It's the parents and the alumni that wouldn't stand for it. And I think that that is true to this day. And it's funny how the kids come in willing to be accepting, but by the time that they graduate and get to the age where they have girls themselves who they want to join their sorority, they decide that, yeah, the way I went through it was the right way. Something is broken when 30 years after I graduated from high school, there hasn't really been any change in that system.
All right, my out of left field today, I want to talk about the joys of being a father. And this is, I just got to talk about a story that I was reminded of not too long ago. When my kids were around, I don't know, 8, 10, 11 years old, something like that, I was making fajitas. And I had these chicken fajitas and beef fajitas in separate bowls marinating on the kitchen table. And my daughters, my son was too young, my daughters and my niece come in and they see these chicken fajitas and they said, "Ooh, what is that?" And I said, "It's rattlesnake." And they said, "We're not eating that." And I said, "You damn sure are. That cost me a fortune. You know how hard it was to find rattlesnake? And you're going to eat it. And you're going to like it." And so I cooked this chicken and served it. And I said, "Now eat that rattlesnake." And they ate it. And, of course, they loved it because it was chicken. And I never thought anything else about it. Fast forward about 17, 18 years later, and they're now in their mid-20s. And everybody's at the house not too long ago. And the rattlesnake story comes up. And I said, "Oh, that was chicken." And you'd have thought I dropped a bomb. And because my niece and my two daughters, I get this, "Uncle Chris," and my daughters say, "Dad, we based our entire lives on the fact that we ate rattlesnake. We've told all of our friends. We've one-upped every story our entire lives on the fact that we ate rattlesnake. You have no idea what you've done to us. Do you know what you've done?" And I started laughing. I said, "Well, I do now." And so it turns out that I had this almost 20-year joke going on my kids. And so I'm just here to say that parenthood is wonderful.
But you learned something that we should learn on this podcast. Sometimes you just need to shut the fuck up.
That's all the time we have. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter, and please rate us on iTunes. Much thanks to Keegan DeLeo, our in-studio producer. That's all the time we have this week. We'll see you next week.